In 1991, I quit my job on Wall Street and I took off and I traveled around the world for as long as my savings lasted. I went to 26 different countries and spent about a year and a half traveling. At the end of that time, I was a 27-year-old man with no job and no savings and no home and no real plan about my future. So I went back to somewhere I had been 3 months earlier and did another 10 days of silence retreats. Now it takes a few days for my mind to calm down, but on the 9th day, I was asked a question that changed my life. We are going to take a 10 seconds of silence retreat after I share this question with you. A Buddhist monk asked me, "What is the ultimate purpose of your life?" And I answered silently that the ultimate purpose of my life is to realize peace. Now, in those quiet coconut groves of South Thailand, it was really about an inner peace, some escape from the conflict I was feeling inside. But as I moved back to my hometown of Portland, Oregon, and joined the workaday world, I realized that my inner peace is intimately connected to my working for outer peace, which in secular terms is conflict resolution. I had found my purpose. I was meant to be a peacemaker in the world. Since that time, I have struggled to live out my purpose in the many different chapters of my life. Often I send out ripples of peace, but sometimes ripples of conflict into my relationships, my work, my communities, and the world around me. I feel like the connection between this inner journey and my outer work has become even more important in my second half of life. In 2011, I served as a Fulbright Nehru Senior Scholar in India, and I studied conflict resolution of water disputes. Now, many people say that water will be the cause of World War III, but I don't buy that. I think, sure, there's going to be some struggles around conflict around water because you have different users that want to use this precious resource, whether we're talking about pastoralists and farmers in Africa, or California cities and agricultural producers, or right here, Kansas and Nebraska on the Republican River. There are other examples I could give. The situation in India is water stressed in many parts of that country. A place that I went in Gujarat had a cement plant that was being built, and the farmers in that area were worried that the cement plant was going to steal their water. So, with the help of a non-governmental organization, they built these simple dams called bandaras, which kept out the salty Arabian Sea, even at high tide, and created these huge freshwater lakes that were used for domestic and irrigation purposes. One farmer in the area told us that his well water had risen by 25 feet and had gone from salt water to what he called sweet water because of these bandaras. He said that because of irrigation, the farms in the area were able to yield 3 crops per year instead of just 1. Imagine if you were a poor farmer in rural India and you tripled your income You can now buy shoes for your children, maybe books for them to go to school, maybe even a motorcycle to take your produce from the field to the market. There are 71% of the Earth's surface that is covered in water, but only 3% is fresh water. Our bodies are 60% water. And to feed the growing population that will top 9 billion on Earth by the middle of this 21st century, we're going to have to double the food production, which means we need to use the precious resource of water much more wisely. I just returned from Afghanistan and Pakistan, where I was facilitating meetings between government officials and water scientists around transboundary water cooperation. This grows out of a grant from the U.S. Institute of Peace to a team of us at University of Nebraska Omaha. And in this region of the world, water is a very sensitive issue. For lots of the year, there is too little water. And the water that is available is often unsafe for drinking or for irrigation purposes. And then for part of the year, there's too much water. They have these devastating floods that come out of the mountains. And because they don't have dams or dikes to hold that back, that can often be a real tragedy. They don't have infrastructure for hydroelectric dams either. And the shared water in many of these countries doesn't have coordinated water management between countries. One example is the Chitral, Kunar, Kabul, Indus river system that starts in northern Pakistan, crosses over into Afghanistan, crosses back into Pakistan, and then drains down into the Arabian Sea. The Kabul River that goes through Afghanistan's capital city is just a polluted trickle of a stream of the mighty river it once was. It smells of sewage and no longer fills the walls that were built to hold it. The Kunar River, which comes through that Pashtun tribal belt, the disputed region between Pakistan and Afghanistan, it is actually more substantial. The Kunar River joins the Kabul River downstream from Kabul city. If Afghanistan and Pakistan were able to come together on some joint infrastructure projects, even a more simple run-of-the-river dam, which is less expensive and less timely to build, they could actually benefit both countries, providing much-needed electricity to Pakistan and much-needed income to Afghanistan. In our meetings at Quaid-i-Azam University in Islamabad, the water scientists and the students, the government officials, and some military were actually open to the idea of these joint research and joint infrastructure projects. We left there hopeful about the prospect for transboundary water cooperation. However, in Afghanistan, the situation was much different. We had meetings at the Afghanistan Ministry of Energy and Water, as well as with university scientists and government officials and some international funding agencies. And the mood was not conducive to this transboundary cooperation. In fact, the Afghans do not trust the Pakistanis. After almost 4 decades of conflict in their country, they know that their scientific community and their diplomatic skills are not on par with their neighbors. So they're reluctant to get into any deal that will cooperate with those neighbors. The Afghans feel this inner conflict around their security situation, which is very dire. And that is projected out into the way that they engage with their neighbors. they feel like they need to build up that scientific community before they get into any deal with any of their neighbors. One of my colleagues, Jack Schroeder, has done an analysis using a tool that we call hydrohegemony, which is power over water, to compare these two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, with regards to the Kunar-Kabul River Basin. And I'm going to step you through the 4 elements of this hydrohegemony analysis. First, on geographic power, the Afghans are actually in a more advantageous position because they are higher up on the watershed. With regards to material power, the Pakistanis are in a more powerful position because they have a much stronger army, a much better economy, a better infrastructure. With regards to negotiating power, the Pakistanis are more powerful because they have, since the 1950s, been negotiating with their eastern neighbor, India, on the Indus River Treaty, which is one of the longest standing water agreements. And on ideational power, this is a question mark, because we just don't know which country is going to be able to bring the more creative ideas to the table on wise water use. This situation with transboundary water in that area is very complicated and challenging. And I feel blessed to be able to live out my calling by doing work in this area. Conflict is natural. It flows like water within us and between us. And the work of peace is as much about the inner journey and what ripples we send out into the world as it is about these tools of negotiation and mediation that we use to resolve disputes. My wish for Omaha and for all of us is that we find ways to live out our ultimate purpose, and in doing so, that we make the world a more peaceful place. Thank you all.